Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and today we're going to be bringing you a pretty cool fish. It can go in a relatively small tank, and that is the Bolivian Ram, so stay tuned. Okay, so what we've got here is a 20 long. It houses 4 Bolivian rams, otherwise known as Mikrogeophagus altispinosus. These fish come from the Amazon River Basin in both Brazil and Bolivia in South America, and the water there is soft and slightly acidic. The pH is generally going to be slightly below 7. Now the fish that you're looking at here, I am feeding them just to get them out so I can get them on video. They are about 2.5, maybe a maximum of 3 inches, and they're pretty much full grown. The males are going to be slightly larger than females often. Now in terms of coloration, both the males and the females look very similar. I have, of these 4 fish, I do have a pair in here, and it appears as though the male is slightly more colorful, and we will see that pair on the right hand side here in the not too distant future. Also, the male, at least right now, has slightly longer fin extensions, although this is not necessarily a way to sex these fish, because females can have fin extensions and females can also be very colorful. Now in terms of their temperament, one of the nice things about these fish is they are relatively peaceful. And that is something to consider when you are choosing tank mates. The only exception to that would be when they're breeding. And so when the pair is defending a breeding grounds or they're defending eggs, they can actually be very aggressive. So a smaller tank may not be suitable for more than just one pair of Bolivian rams, because other fish in that tank may get bullied if they are in the breeding ground area of the pair. So tank mates. I've had these fish in with gouramis, usually less aggressive gouramis, honey gouramis, dwarf gouramis, different types of tetras. There's actually a guppy in there. There used to be more, and they left the guppies alone, just completely ignored them, along with platies. There are bristlenose plecos in here. I've had them in with cory cats. Believe it or not, I've actually had these fish in larger tanks with large Geophagus hecali and tapajos, and it was the Bolivian rams that would actually chase the much larger Geophagus around the tank, never doing any damage, never any fin nipping, but it was actually the aggressor. They've been in with severums, different types of loaches, so pretty much any relatively peaceful community fish will work out fairly well with these rams. You may want to watch, for conspecific aggression. If you were, let's say, put them in with electric blue rams or German blue rams, they might spar for territory from time to time, but they are relatively peaceful. In terms of the temperature, I keep the entire fish room somewhere in the 76 to 78 range, and they've been doing great. They would probably prefer a temperature somewhere in the 78 to 80 range, but they've been breeding right around 76 to 78. pH, as I'd already mentioned, they would prefer a pH that's neutral to slightly acidic. That unfortunately is not the type of water we can give them here, and so the pH is closer to 8. And once again, we can see them sparring here, but once again, they are breeding at that pH close to 8, and we're not having any issues. Now, water hardness, once again, it would be better if it was on the softer side, but for us, our water is on the harder side of the spectrum at 200 total dissolved solids. Our water quality tends to stay very good, and we try to keep our nitrates down around 20 parts per million, and the way we do that is by doing water changes. But in this tank, because we only have the 4 Bolivian rams, a couple bristlenose, and that one guppy, it's a relatively lightly stocked tank, and it does have some plants, so we can get away with no more than a 25% water change once a week, and that seems to be doing a good job keeping the water parameters in check. Feeding the fish are not going to be a challenge. We feed them sinking pellets. They eat flake food. They will eat frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp, although I tend to limit the bloodworms a little bit. And they also, believe it or not, like live baby brine. And so even though it's tiny, they go crazy for it. They enjoy it quite a bit. Tank size, I would say a 20 gallon is probably about the minimum I would go. I mean, could you get away with having one in a 10 gallon? Probably, but I would like to see these fish more in a 20 long or a 20 high. I think that would probably be the minimum for me. Decorations, again, this tank is more of a breeding tank, so it's not set up to look amazing, but we've got some driftwood, we've got some rock work, we've got some plants. I think when you're considering hardscaping for these fish, if you're planning to breed them, give them some flat surfaces. They would appreciate that, whether that's some broad-leaved live plants or a piece of slate, maybe hidden away somewhere, or even driftwood. They tend to lay their eggs on flat surfaces, although our pair is actually, when they breed, they just lay their eggs right on the gravel, and they've done that multiple times, and they've never laid their eggs anywhere else. Plants are fine, and we've got plants in this tank. They don't really dig much, so they might dig a small depression for breeding, but in terms of rearranging your tank, they just generally don't do it. Gravel, as you can see, we've got gravel. For some reason, I've had gravel in all the tanks where I've had rams. They'd probably prefer sand, and if I were to set this tank up again for them, the Mikrogeophagus means that geophagus means earth eater, so sand would probably be a more appropriate substrate for them. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now for breeding, I haven't had too many problems. Once they are old enough to breed, they will usually pair off, and so what we did is we got this group of 4, waited for a pair to form, and that's what happened. This is one individual in that pair. And then they find a breeding spot, and the male sometimes will do like a little shimmy or a shake, and the male will fertilize the female eggs. And then they both generally stay in that area once the eggs are laid and defend that area, and they'll push the other 2 rams off to the other side of the tank. Nothing super violent, but other fish are not necessarily going to be able to get there. The one complication we have, I do pull the eggs because we have 2 bristlenose plecos and those snails, and I have found that although the parents are really good at protecting the area, if you turn the lights off, the bristlenose plecos at night are going to eat the eggs. And I've found that these rams, at least this pair, they don't do the best job of protecting their eggs from the snails either. So once the eggs are laid, I pull them out, put them in an egg tumbler, and that seems to help quite a bit. And then usually the eggs are going to hatch in 2 to 3 days depending on temperature, and then the fry will lose their yolk sac after a few days, and so you can start feeding them live baby brine. And the fry are really small, not quite as small as maybe like some peacock gudgeon eggs that we've had in the past, but the fry are definitely on the smaller side. So this is a great fish. They're relatively peaceful. I think if there are challenges, it's going to be, making sure that your tank mates are not overly aggressive, that they're not going to fin nip them and chase them around the tank. Just the way they swim, they kind of like to, they expend a lot of energy when they swim. They've constantly got their fins going, and they'll kind of start and stop a lot, and it would be a shame to see a larger, more aggressive fish kind of take advantage of them, because they really don't, really show a ton of aggression. So great fish. Very nice color, stays relatively small, so you can certainly put it in a 20-gallon high or a 20-gallon long. All right, everyone. So we love the Bolivian ram. It's an awesome fish. It can go in a relatively small tank. They're colorful. They've got some personality. So if you have a chance to get them and you've got the space for them, I highly recommend them. So if you like this video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.